6:33 now on the Green Light Special, and let's get you the straight dope interview as promised with Ira Kaufman. Who better to do that with the big news, Brady to the Bucs? And Ira's kind enough to join us on our straight dope interview, which is of course always brought to you by the Casual Pint, Toledo's most unique craft beer market, as Ira joins us from the 813. Ira, Nick Switala, thanks in advance for this. It's a pleasure.
Hey, my friend. Brady Mania sweeping the Bay Area, my friend.
Yes, indeed.
It's down here in force, and Clearwater Beach is packed, even with the virus. And Raymond James Stadium, I believe, is going to be packed this fall, Nick, after the news broke. It's not official yet because I think certain league rules are in place.
Sure.
That teams are not allowed to officially comment on these signings yet. But, it's common knowledge down here that Brady's coming. That's probably the biggest news in franchise history. Iconic player, season tickets off the shelves, merchandise going to be off the shelf, number 12 jerseys. It's a big deal, Nick. It's a very big deal down here.
Yeah, and while I wanted to get right into that, you're telling me the governor hasn't shut down those beaches yet on the stuff bigger than football. Real quick, Ira, what's the update down there?
The update is the Tampa side beaches have been shut, and the Pinellas beaches, which are the more famous ones, Clearwater Beach, Treasure Island, St. Pete Beach, still open, Nick, and absolutely crammed with 19-year-olds who have anything on their mind but the coronavirus.
Yeah, couldn't care less, which is why it really surprises me as far as the bigger picture is concerned. But all right, well, as far as a lot of those 19-year-olds go, no matter the age, the average Buck fan walking down the beach, if you want to even call himself a Buck fan, herself a Buck fan, no Buck gear, never been to a game. Does the return, does it kind of change? Does this completely change that? Where's that 65,000 a day? Do you expect that every Sunday? And is it going to be contributed from that average fan that in most years couldn't care less?
Well, Nick, I think you hit on the most important point of all. Brady is one of those guys, and unlike a Phillip Rivers or a Teddy Bridgewater, or even a Cam Newton, Tom Brady transcends football. He transcends sports. Everybody's heard of him. Everybody knows him. His famous wife adds to the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying, Nick, is the addition of Brady will now generate interest among the casual fan. The casual fan. The Bucs have their 10,000, 15,000 diehards,
mm-hmm.
as most teams do in sports. Those people are coming no matter what the standings show. But Brady's arrival is going to produce a tremendous amount of curiosity among the casual fan who knows who Brady is and wants to check him out. And already the Bucs have gotten a big bump in season tickets. The number 12 jerseys are being manufactured. They'll be out soon, and you won't be able to keep them on the shelf. And it's a brief respite, Nick, from all the somber news that's going around in the world today.
Yeah, I can't imagine the excitement level for this upcoming football season. Ira Kaufman, kind enough to join us on our Straight Dope interview. While we're on the subject of the fans themselves, as far as Winston goes, first parter, do you think he's even back as a backup? Any scenario there? And I assume the answer is no. And if so, was it really the tail end of last season, Ira, that regardless whether or not Brady had any interest in Tampa, would it have still pissed off the 10,000, 15,000 Buck fans, whether or not Brady's involved, if Winston took the first snap under center for week one? How about that for a second with the fans' frustration with Winston?
Nick, everything changed in the last two games, and I mean everything. Because before that, the Bucs were 7-7, riding a 4-game win streak. Winston was playing well. They were playing winning football. They overcame a terrible start under Arians.
They sure did.
And 2 home games coming up, chance to finish 9-7 with a 6-game streak. That would really provide a lot of impetus going into 2020. And all of a sudden, here comes Houston and Atlanta. Bucs find a way to lose both games. It's not all on Winston. The kicker missed 3 field goals in the final game against Atlanta, but he threw 6 interceptions, Nick, in those 2 games, including the pick 6 in overtime, and Arians couldn't shake it. He just couldn't get it out of his head the way that season ended. He thought Winston was past it. He thought those problems were behind him. And the more he thought about it, the more he said, I can't trust this guy. We led the league in giveaways. We finished 7-9 despite that. We got a pretty good team here.
Mm-hmm.
If we can control the ball and play smart football, we give ourselves a chance to win. And that led him to Tom Brady. And those two games absolutely sunk Winston in Tampa. And I don't see him as Brady's backup here. I think that ship sailed, Nick.
Okay, yeah, and like I said, I would be stunned if that were the case, especially with a guy that clearly needs a change of scenery. But okay, the Bucs themselves, Arians, he had it with Winston. I could see why. That was a nice little storyline for Tampa Bay, starting to make a little noise. I remember that well at the tail end of last season. As far as Arians goes, every quarterback I've watched under Arians chucks it down the field. And watching Brady, let's get to the negatives first with the diminishing skills, and then we'll get to the expectations as a whole. But in 18, he's throwing the ball 6 yards down the field. In 19, he's throwing the ball 4 yards down the field. I mean, isn't that kind of an issue with Arians? I mean, these guys have forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, but I'm just curious from a fit standpoint. Does this guy think he's going to show up and chuck it down the field, or are they going to have to build a team where this guy's just asked to manage games?
It's a fair point, Nick. It's a fair point. Look, I would say it's going to be a problem. On paper, it looks like a problem because his skill set doesn't seem to mesh with Arians' philosophy of go deep and quarterback's got to stand in there and
that's
take
Evans.
a hit. And we got 5 guys out on the pattern.
Yes.
I agree with that, Nick. But I'll say this: when it came time and Arians was asked in Indianapolis at the Combine a month ago, he always talked about, well, it depends on who's behind door number 2. Every time he was asked about bringing Winston back, well, it depends. Let's see who's behind door number 2. Well, when somebody asked, who do you want behind door number 2? He said Tom Brady. That's what he said. He didn't hesitate. He didn't say Phillip Rivers. He didn't say Andy Dalton. He said Tom Brady. And he knows everything about Tom Brady. He knows what Tom Brady's strengths is. And it's just inconceivable, Nick, to me, that they're going to spend $30 million on a guy and not construct an offense to accentuate Brady's skills, which is getting the ball out quickly, not taking a hit, and using the whole field, especially your backs and your tight ends. I'll tell you one guy who I think is really going to benefit from this. Listen, Mike Evans and Godwin, they're going to catch their balls no matter who's throwing it to them.
Right.
But they got a tight end from Harvard, undrafted, named Cameron Brate. The guy's a pretty good football player. He's sitting behind O.J. Howard. Howard's a first-round pick. He's a little bit of an underachiever. Brate never drops the ball, and he runs a good pattern, and I believe very quickly he will emerge as a Brady favorite. Nick, they got to get a running back, preferably somebody with good hands.
You don't like Jones? Complimentary back is Jones after 700 yards last year, more of a complimentary back in your eyes?
He improved, Nick. He improved from a terrible rookie season. I mean, horrible rookie season.
Yeah, he was terrible.
He averaged less than 2 yards a carry, Nick. That's hard to do.
Yeah, it is.
As a rookie.
It is.
And showed stone hands. So they worked with him, and he improved, but I don't think he's good enough at this point for Brady's taste. And Nick, Brady's going to have a big say in this offense right now.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Not only that, but about Arians as well. And as far as Arians goes, he's written a book about this stuff. I have not. So that's from that standpoint, I understand when he's the hottest commodity. He viewed him as the hottest commodity well before any of this drama took place. I mean, Ira, Vegas opened this up at 40-1. There's people out there with Brady to Buccaneer 40-1 tickets, and obviously one of the teams that led the way in that department from the odds standpoint was the Chargers. This obviously was not all about football, Ira, because I see more holes in the Buccaneer roster than I do with what maybe the Chargers can evolve into. Do you agree with that? Do you think Tampa Bay was the best case for Brady to get that last ring? Or is this strictly more about proximity to New York involved, maybe just a better fit in general, not everything to do about football? How about that for a second?
Well, Nick, I think you could argue who's got the better roster. I think the Bucs are better in some areas. Maybe the wide receiver tandem, I think, is untouchable in pro football with Evans and Godwin. I don't think anybody can match that.
I agree. It's one,
duo.
Absolutely.
They got Austin Eckler, who's better than any back the Bucs have, and the offensive line's about even. Defense, pretty close. I think Derwin James is a heck of a player, and so is Bosa. But the Bucs got some pieces too. And they got JPP back, and they got the NFL's leading sacker. I thought California, Nick, would have some allure for Brady growing up in California, but in the end, I think the West Coast ended up being a plus for the Bucs because of family concerns. I I don't believe this nonsense about Brady was worried about going to the AFC and having to play, Pat Mahomes. I don't think Brady's mind is wired like that.
I agree with that.
I don't think he feels he can lose to anybody. That's part of what makes him great. If I remember right, Nick, the Patriots almost beat the Chiefs last year. Narrow game. I think it came down to a Brady pass in the end zone.
It did.
Nick, I don't know if you remember it, but he
in Foxborough. Yep.
Yeah, in Foxborough, he floated the ball with the game on the line, and that pass itself raised some issues in my mind about the zip on the ball that Brady's got. He is diminished, Nick, and in that way, it's a little bit of a gamble for the Bucs. But I'll tell you what's not a gamble on the economic side, and that's always a component. And I know they're giving him $30 million, Nick, but the Glazers are all in, and it's the Brady brand. They want to be part of the Brady brand, and in that, off the field, I think it's already been a winner, Nick, in that sense.
Right, and you're absolutely right. And for every moderate Buck fan that's walking on the beach before Brady, Lord knows the Chargers need every PSL. So there's a huge impact in that department, no questions asked. Ira Kaufman here on our Straight Dope interview, of course, always brought to you by the Casual Pint Toledo's most unique craft beer market. Doors still open, crawlers, growlers to go, 35 craft beers on tap. That's at the Casual Pint Toledo, where beer lovers meet. You mentioned the great tandem, and that's what made me think of the Chargers with Williams and Allen and Henry, but you're right. I'd probably take Howard, I'd probably take Evans, and I'd probably take Godwin. There's a relationship with Antonio Brown, and rumors were Brady, he was okay with Brown, and they were buddies, I guess. Is there any scenario you can see Antonio Brown joining forces with this Buccaneer football team?
This is a very compelling storyline, Nick. I might be out of touch here. Maybe I am.
I know it's guesses, but feel free.
I think that'd be a disaster. I think that's a disaster. And well, Nick, there's not enough footballs to throw around. I mean, Antonio Brown couldn't take it when Schuster started getting his balls in Pittsburgh.
You're right.
I mean, and so if Brown is happy in Tampa getting his balls, well, maybe at that point Evans is hacked off. And you don't need overkill, Nick. I think that's a bad idea. I can't believe Brady's got this unshakable bond with Antonio Brown. I mean, it's not like they played together for 4 years. So I think once Brady realizes what he's got to work with here in Tampa, right. I don't think you need Antonio Brown. I don't think Arians would be in favor of that. I think that would be giving Brady too much power. Hey, Nick, one more point on the Chargers. One more point.
Please.
I think even if Brady had gone there, check me if I'm wrong here, but I still think ultimately they'd be playing in the shadow of the Rams in Los Angeles. I
agree.
Even with Brady, and I think,
right.
I don't want to go there as a number 2 franchise. I think that could have been a factor too.
Okay, so and I agree with that. And you think Brady could have had that on his mind? Okay, that's actually an excellent point because I was, didn't know if you just don't know how much football is involved. But with Brady, with his profile, with that production and the whole bit last go around, I completely understand why that could be the case. As far as the overall, we're talking to Ira Kaufman here. As far as the overall expectations as this team, if you can turn back the clock and maybe give me a taste of what it was after they won the Super Bowl with the big-time defense, and then does that kind of transform back into that now? Could the Bucs fans dare expect a Super Bowl out of this?
Bucs fans have been lying in wait, Nick, for 17 years. They haven't had much to crow about. They got the NFC's longest playoff drought, 12 years. Haven't won a playoff game since the Super Bowl. That's a long time, Nick. That's a generation ago. These diehards have been waiting for something to believe in. Now they have it. In Brady, they trust. Nick, I don't care if he's 43. They don't care if, his arm strength's a little sapped and he can't escape the rush like he did. They got Tom Brady. They got, arguably the greatest quarterback that's ever in 100-year history of this league. And they're going to run with it. The expectations are going to be high. It's an okay division. New Orleans is very good. Obviously, they're the team you got to look up to.
Yeah.
But Carolina's rebuilding. They don't have much, and Atlanta's kind of average. So it's there for the taking. You got to play the Saints twice. You got to play Breeze twice. The Bucs are not a bad team, Nick, if they play smart football, and that's what number 12 is here to do.
Yeah, and I think everybody outside of Tampa might be waiting for the general public to bet the Tom Brady odds up to New Orleans Saints being an unavoidable ticket as far as the representative of the division, because I think that's where this is going with them being 14-1 odds to win the Super Bowl. It's hard to see the realistic aspect of it, but if you're a Buc fan, I gotta say I'd probably be on board. I'll let you go on this, Ira. Does the approval of the CBA perhaps make this playoffs or bust to lower the expectations a little bit with the extra team? Does it kind of make it a playoff or bust feel versus the past setup?
I think it raises, along with the addition of Brady, Nick, it raises the stakes for Bruce Arians. Now, you got to remember, Arians is a 2-time Coach of the Year. He made his name in Arizona, but the last 2 years in Arizona, he didn't have a winning record. Went 7-9 last year, so he's got a lot to prove in terms of resurrecting his portfolio. And now it's 7 of 16 teams, Nick, in each conference making the playoffs, and the odds are pretty good. One of those teams is going to be 8-8. I believe last year Pittsburgh would have made it in the AFC at 8-8.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen 9 out of 10 times. It's going to drive me insane, but I'm still going to watch the games.
Yeah, so if you're telling me that the Bucs can't go 8-8 when they went 7-9 with a quarterback throwing 30 picks, that's on Arians at that point, and that's on the GM. And those guys, by the way, are linked very much together, Jason Light and Arians. The only reason Light retained his job a year ago was he brought in Arians, his buddy. So, they're either going to flourish together or go out together. This is a short-term fix with Brady, Nick. It's a 2-year deal. And they're going to ride off into the sunset in Arians' golf cart in a couple of years. And we'll see what happens. But the excitement level, it's hard to overstate it, Nick, in Tampa.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. And while on the CBA, I'm curious whether or not you agree. And I'll get your thoughts maybe on the backup quarterback down the road. I'm fascinated to see what this team does in the draft for somebody to come in under Brady's wings. I assume that's in the situation as well. But
I think that's essential, Nick. I think
100%. Why get him then? I agree. The guy still has football acumen. Let's be honest. He's not going to forget what he's learned under Belichick and all. But did you have? I thought this new CBA. What's your thoughts on it, real quick? And I actually thought this was going to be more than inevitable, but with all the 65% average Joes in the league. But this thing ended up coming down to a few votes. Did that surprise you?
It seemed a little rushed to me, Nick. The whole thing seemed a little rushed to me. And I think the startling thing was, I believe 20% of the rank and file didn't even vote. That's shocking to me. I mean, you got a general political election. I understand people aren't motivated. They think, my vote doesn't count. But these are people voting on their livelihood. And for 1 out of 5 to not even check off a name and a vote, that really surprised me. It was close, but the part of the deal I like, Nick, is taking better care of the former players. You can't have people with dementia going around with $30,000 pensions. That's a real bad look for the NFL.
Good point.
Speaking of looks, Nick, I'll leave you with this.
Please.
And again, I might be in the minority, but people were ripping the NFL. Some people were. For proceeding with free agency and the start of the new year and with the coronavirus and arguing it's a bad optic and it's a terrible look. And I thought that was a cheap shot at the league. I mean, the league's made more than its share of mistakes during Goodell's reign. But I don't think Roger Goodell should have to, make excuses for starting the league year when there's no health issue involved. Show me a legitimate health concern and I'll buy it. But this thing about bad optics, I'm just not buying it. Nick, I thought that was misguided.
Yeah, and you know what? I was kind of leaning on that side, but once I saw the way things are, it is 2020 after all. This isn't 40 years ago. After seeing the way things can get done, I think you're kind of convincing me otherwise. That's a hell of a point, and I really appreciate the time, Ira. This was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Hope to talk to you again, Ben.
Yes, please. It would be my pleasure. Thanks a lot, Ira. Of course, Ira Kaufman with the big news with Brady to Tampa, and then, of course, touching on the league year starting on time at the tail end there. That's very good thoughts. Bottom line, I mean, there's some things that would have applied several years ago that do not apply today, and yeah, I think that's a good reason to start the league year on time, especially when this thing, as I said at the beginning of the show, could get 10 times worse. That was excellent thoughts from Ira Kaufman as he joined us on our Straight Dope interview, which is, of course, always brought to you by the Casual Pint, Toledo's most unique craft beer market. During this tough time, of course, our good friends at the Pint have you covered, so they installed the pint at home, and they have you covered with the amazing Casual Pint grub as well. Ready to pick up, 20 minutes, hours until 8 p.m. That is at the Casual Pint Toledo. Still going strong. Go support where beer lovers meet.